Okay, so now we come to the final panel of our conference or our meeting. And I think that this will be a really interesting panel dealing with one of the hottest topic in the basic income debate, and these are the basic income experiments. So we have some changes to the schedule. So first, who will be presenting will be Anja Askelan. Or no? Okay. Okay, so... No? Okay, sorry, so I don't know. Yeah, I know.
That's okay, she doesn't have a presentation, so you can just leave that up.
So who will start? Just decide, because it's informal anyway. So, okay, okay. So she's the vice chair of UBIE.
I'm also I am from Norway, and I'm also chair in the Norwegian network. I don't have a presentation on the board, so I'll try to be clear. I want to talk a bit about the existing pilots that has been done. But first of all, I want to say we don't really need pilots to justify basic income. It's enough to know, the arguments about social justice, freedom, and economic safety is we don't need pilots to prove that. But there is quite a few things we can learn after these projects, after all. I will mention quickly Namibia and India and a bit about Minkom. And yeah, I guess you know quite a bit about it before, too. Namibia was the first project in a small village in 2010, and the results there, it's contained for 1,000 people, and it was for the amount they got, it was below the food sustainability line. They got $100 Namibian, and to survive, to the food poverty line was 155 Namibian dollars. The children got half the amount. And they started a date, and all the people who was living in the village at that date got this basic income, but they had a problem with immigration. So the families who had other family members coming in, and they will not get any basic income, so these families have a little bit less good results. But overall, they had very good results on all measures. They have better health results, the children got education, there was less poverty, and the criminality rates was reduced by 40% in average. And they have also great effects in the economy. There you can see this growing spiral. The neighbors, they all have a little bit money, and they started to start bakeries and making bricks. And so there was this growing kind of spiral. So it get a lot more input into the economy that the basic income should say, actually. They started also, they had saving, they started to save, and they reduced their debts. Yeah, they started investing in new goat and stuff, yeah. But what was very interesting is that they decided to protect the villagers in the beginning. They were worried about when people get money, they will get vulnerable. So they decided to have the 18 wisest persons in the village came together and And they made a few decisions that they should close the alcohol shop the day they got the money, for instance. And after a while, they also decided to make a marketplace when the economic growth spiral started. Yeah, but it showed that the worries about alcoholic, that people will drink up the money, was not really justified. So that was a good result also. This project has not had no control village, so it was criticized by that. And India did a similar project with 8 villages and 12 control villages, and they more or less got the same results there. And they also have a great effects on for girls, especially, yeah, and for women, you know. They were less dependent on men, and yeah, that I should be quick about this, yeah. But both places, they decided that the amount they got was a little bit too small, so they will get a better result if they get a higher amount. There has not been a full pilot in a Western country, but we have that in the Dopin from 74 to 78 in Canada. And that was a rural village. And they have very insecure income because of what the weather conditions decided how the harvest would be. So that was actually one of 5 pilot projects in North America in the 70s. But this was the saturation point, you can say. Was the only place that all in the village was a part of the project. They didn't get. It was not that everyone get this payment. It was if they sink below a certain limit, they will get this payment unconditionally. Yeah. Except that under there. So there was 18% of the people in the village received this benefit. This project was designed to also find out what happened on the labor market. So as Sebastian said, it was a bit reduction in work. For the women, they 7 to 9%. I don't think that I have heard this. It was about 1% in this place, you know, not 7 to 9, but maybe. I'm not an expert. I'm only an activist. I just have to say that. And 1%, I've heard that there should be a reduced work in the labor market. And there was, among married women, it was a 3% reduction and 7% reduction for single mothers. And they could also find no special difference for the women, no, for the girls, you know. But the boys, they seem to get out of the labor market to a bigger degree. But, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. It was Dr. Evelyn Forget who looked into this data, and she started in 2009 to look into this from a health perspective mainly. But the thing, when they looked and they wondered where these boys were headed, and then they found that most of them was going back to school or continue the 12th grade. So they were not slipping on, they were not stopping working. But the most amazing thing is, even if we are working a bit less, maybe that is a good thing. Maybe we just need a bit longer time to find the right work. And maybe we already work enough. Because Evelyn Forget's big finding was on health. there was 8.5% reduction in hospitalization in that period of time, and was a big reduction in hospitalization because of psychiatric illnesses. And also car crashes reduced, and of course work-related accidents was reduced, and also violence in the home was really reduced. So you can imagine what kind of stress release this must be for the whole society. Also those who didn't receive the payment. Yeah. But this was in 74, and this was not a full 74 to 78, and this was not a full basic income. So I think, well, we still don't get all the, the best thing would of course be to implement it somewhere, but it would be very interesting to see a saturation point like this now in a Western country, in Europe maybe, where we can look at the cumulative effects when people are getting this, and how the social effects are, and how we are, all these health-related things. And as Bob also was talking about, actually a decommercialization of human relations, you know, that is needed, you know, And we also need, of course, to try to get closer to a real world context, and then we also will get insight into the economical effects, like supply of goods, and how it will affect the prices and work habits, and how people and companies and employers respond to this. Also employers, we haven't seen so much of that. Yeah. We who are advocates for basic income, we are convinced of these wonderful effects. So, this is, yes, I just want to repeat that we don't really need these pilots to justify basic income. But we can try to create a project so we can find something useful to give us a bit more insight. Yeah, and it is good for promoting basic income, I think, to have a basic income project. So thank you. I'm sorry.
Now I would like to, so Daniel Feher, the chair of, no? Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you again. So Kylie, Heike Hilamo, I hope that I pronounced it right, professor of social policy, and he will present the Finnish pilot project, if I'm not mistaken.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to talk about the Finnish basic income experiment. So as probably all of you know, Finland started this experiment in the beginning of this year, and there has been a huge interest around this experiment, and we have been thinking about why that is the case. I have a couple of cases. One is that when it comes to comparable studies on well-being or happiness or other indicators related to welfare, the Nordic countries, they tend to occupy the top positions. So probably some people might think that the social protection systems in the Nordic countries are really, really good, and still Finland, as one of the Nordic countries, wants to experiment with basic income. So there has to be something very special about this idea if even a country with such an extensive welfare state wants to experiment the idea. And I'll give you some background information. I'll give you some context around this experiment, and then I'll give you some information about the present stage of this experiment, and finally I'll give some thoughts about the European basic income idea. So the labor market context is really dominating the debate on basic income, and I think that's outside the basic income community. When it comes to general population, the labor market context is really the most. It seems to be the most important, and it seems that the labor market is not working very well, since there are a lot of people outside the labor market, and a lot of people, especially young people and long-term unemployed, who have very poor chances of re-entering the labor market or entering the labor market for the first time. And also it seems that there is a deep wedge between those who are inside in the labor markets and who are covered by earnings-related benefits, sick benefits, pensions, parental insurance, earnings-related unemployment compensation, etc. And those who are outsiders. And the insiders are those who are faring fairly well, and they don't want to share their benefits with the others. And the one major concern above all is that those young people who are in danger of social exclusion and long-term unemployed, that they are suffering from poverty and all kind of social problems and also health problems. So we see that there is a strong gradient also in life expectancy by education or by income. And the system which we have, they were developed during the time of the industrial society, when the labor market was dominated by fairly secure industrial jobs, but nowadays we have a economy which is mostly based on services and knowledge intensive workplaces. And then we still have the means testing, which is related to poor incentives and also stigma. And the systems are really complex. So we would like our social security to look like this, that there is a kind of a place where you can see that you're entering the system and you can find your route through the system. But actually this is the way the system looks very often. So it's no wonder that there was a huge interest around this idea of basic income, which was introduced surprisingly by a coalition, a right-wing coalition, where there was this populist party and the conservative party on the right-hand side and the center party. And actually a very important advocate behind this experiment was a think tank which is member of the European Liberal Forum. It's called E2. It's close to the center party, and they actually were very influential in putting this experiment into the government program. So it came from the center party. So the center party wanted to look as progressive. They wanted to look good in the eyes of young people, urban people, and that's why they included the basic income experiment in the government program. So the government started in May 2015 when they had the experiment mentioned in the government program. The following year was the time for planning of the experiment, and now it's time for implementation, and then we have the first results in 2019. And I would like to show you a very short video, 2 minutes video, which describes the experiment quite well. Let's put it into start.